Well, good evening. It is a beautiful evening here in the Midwest. We had a few thunder bumpers come through. That's a nice thing. And we are doing episode number 35 of the Course in Miracles. So, introduction to the book. And here's the book. And the book is pretty amazing. It is I guess you could say, it is the most astonishingly revelatory book I have ever encountered. I think that we all live in an encapsulated and somewhat delusional world that we have imagined is real. And the Course comes along and disassembles a lot of our misunderstandings, our fantasies, our misdirected desires, our belief in things that are completely untrue, completely without validation or foundation. So it is a kind of a harrowing experience for a lot of people when you first step into the Course, because you are going to have a lot of the balloons in your little world start being popped. So that actually is a good thing, because it opens us up to the truth. And that really is what the journey is all about, to discover the truth and to escape the nightmares. So as we always do, we'll start off tonight with today's lesson. And today's lesson was number 129. This is an interesting lesson. The previous lesson gave us this idea of there is nothing in this world that I want. And then today's lesson follows that up with beyond this world, there is a world I want. So essentially what we're doing is we're questioning the world that we're surrounded by, with all the chaos, all the grief, all the upheaval, all the insecurities, and then looking at a world that perhaps we abandoned and then forgot we did abandon, where there is continuity, peace, harmony, beauty, joy, and in every way an ecstatic world that we can reclaim, that we can re-access. So today's lesson reads, this is the thought that follows from the one we practiced yesterday. You cannot stop with the idea that the world is worthless, for unless you see that there is something else to hope for, you will only be depressed. And I think that is a source of depression for many, many people who are taking drugs and doing, extra yoga and all these other things, eating a good diet. I think the real truth behind their depression and the struggle that they often find themselves in is just simply the fact that this world is overwhelming when you really stop and become lucid, even for a few minutes. So this is a world that is designed to trap us and then victimize us, and then eventually kill us. And of course, since we are eternal beings, we really aren't going to be killed, but our body is going to be snuffed, and then we come back in for another round. So hopefully at some point, all of us will awaken to that level where we realize the futility of trying to keep this joyride going and start putting our attention on the idea of reclaiming our heritage and reclaiming the truth. It says our emphasis is not on giving up the world, but on exchanging it for what is far more satisfying, filled with joy and capable of offering you peace. Think you this world can offer that to you? And, that's one of the great illusions of this world. If only I had my little shack on an island out in the middle of the ocean with plenty of food and good companionship and, ever-flowing wine and beer, life would be perfect. And a lot of people realize that. They make that happen in their lives. And then, ironically, something else falls apart. There's always a source of dissatisfaction in this material world. And, you know, relationships change, our goals in life change, but ultimately, at the core of this human experience, we will find kind of a flat tire outcome, and that is that is something that is depressing in unto itself. It goes on to say it might be worth a little time to think once more about the value of this world. Perhaps you will concede there is no loss in letting go all thought of value here. The world you see is merciless indeed, unstable, cruel, unconcerned with you, quick to avenge, and pitiless with hate. It gives you but to rescind, and takes away all the things that you have cherished for a while. No lasting love is found, for none is here. This is the world of time, where all things end. And that really is the secret of, you know, comprehending what we're being presented with here, is that everything, even that brick that you stumble over on your way out the door every morning, you know, every material thing will disappear, whether it's in a few seconds, like a puff of smoke, or a billion years, like a brick. You know, it's all going to eventually reduce itself down to nothing. So attaching ourselves to the ephemeral is a really good way to make yourself miserable. When you're not getting the things that you want in life, you can stop and draw back and start to question. And that's when the course becomes very salient. But if you're immersed in one of those cycles of manifesting this and manifesting that, and, you know, having a great outcome for all your finances and all your adventures in life, it usually will take a crisis before you will stop and look at that and question whether or not you've been setting yourself up for a huge fall with all these addictions that we find in life. The lesson goes on to say, now is the last step certain. Now you stand an instant space away from timelessness. What an idea, timelessness. Being in a state of existence where you don't have to worry about the wristwatch, and you don't have to worry about the decay that the body goes through. You don't have to worry about, you know, the supply that our bank account occasionally comes up with, and on other times we're, you know, eating cans of pork and beans, trying to stretch our dollars. So imagine a world where everything is timeless and infinite. All of your supply is infinite. All of your joy is infinite. All of your companionship is infinite. It goes on to say, here you can but look forward, never back, to see again the world you do not want. Here is the world that comes to take its place. As you unbind your mind from little things, the world sets forth to keep you prisoner. And that really is what the game is. You know, if you can only get that new car at the end of next month, or if you can only get this bill paid off, or if you can only, you know, attain this material object, your ego is going to have you convinced that this is the secret. This is what is going to give you a sense of enrichment and fulfillment and keep you happy for eternity. And of course, that's the great illusion of the ego. Value them not, and they will disappear. Esteem them, and they will seem real to you. So what we're doing here is we're going through a process of replacing the physical forms with ideas. And if you are attached to something that is a physical bauble, you know, the new car, well, shift your thinking and realize there is no place that you cannot access. You are all places at all times. You are an infinite being. You exist outside the space-time continuum. And so within that existence, you are dwelling in God, and God is infinitude. So you really don't need a card because you're everywhere at once. So once you imbibe these ideas of shifting from a material object to a spiritual concept, a spiritual realization, what happens is that there is a natural unfolding that goes on in the material world. The right car will appear for you. The right home, the right house will show up for you. The right apartment, the right clothing, all of these things. What we want to do is to replace this objectified world with an awareness of the fact that we already have the spiritual concept that is underlying this material need or desire. And once we start really doing that and become successful, then all of your needs are met. You're not trapped. You're not caught without things. So finishing up the lesson here, it says, such is the choice. What loss can be for you in choosing not to value nothingness? This world holds nothing that you really want, but what you choose instead you want indeed. Let it be given you today. It waits but for your choosing it, to take the place of all the things you seek but do not want. And that really is what happens. We think we want this or we want that, and we beat our brains out, and we finally acquire it, and 3 months later it's boring and we want to replace it, and we're not interested in it. It's lost its charm. So as we are starting to awaken, we begin to realize that we don't really want the material goods. It's necessary for us to have them to get through the world, to get around transportation needs and financial needs, etc. But what we really want is the underlying truth that lies in spirit, and that is the recognition that we have God as much as God has us. We live and move and have our being in God. So all of our material needs are easily accessed in the most effortless way. So anyway, that was the lesson that showed up today. If you were doing the daily lessons, you would have started on January 1st. And so today you would have arrived at lesson 129. Now, and I see a few of our people have shown up here, which is a wonderful thing. And I assume that everybody is on the same wavelength here. It's a beautiful evening of flow here in the Midwest. We had some storms scurrying through earlier, and it cleared out the skies, cleared out the dust, and brought us a little bit of nurturing from a presence that resides in all of the physical realities that we experience. We imagine ourselves to be in the physical world, but really the physical world is in our mind. And the more we restore our mind to being in harmony with God's mind, the more the experience in this life will be optimized. So that's what we're all seeking to do, is to look beyond the physical and to recognize the truth that God did not plan for us to be experiencing all these horrors. And so hopefully that will be something that you will start seeing show up in your life. Now we're continuing with chapter 5, Healing and Wholeness, because this is a good chapter. It's very rich with a lot of concepts and ideas and imagery that afford us a sense of liberation. We're no longer bound and limited by all of the ills of the body, or all of the ills of our bank account, or all of the ills of the world. And Right now, we're going to look at the third section, which is the guide to salvation. The way to recognize your brother is by recognizing the Holy Spirit in him. So don't look at the physical attributes, and don't look at the ego personality attributes. You have to step above that. You have to step beyond that and ask to see the presence of God within that person. And that's what the Holy Spirit is. The Holy Spirit is the active presence of God in this material realm. So it goes on to say, I have already said that the Holy Spirit is a bridge for the transfer of perception to knowledge. So we can use the terms as if they were related, because in his mind, capital His, they are. So in God's mind, in the Holy Spirit's mind, in our true mind, the two are related. This relationship must be in his mind, because unless it were, the separation between the two ways of thinking would not be open to healing. He is a part of the Holy Trinity, because his mind is partly yours and also partly God's. This needs clarification, not in statement, but in experience. So whenever you are interacting with somebody, if you are dumbing yourself down to just seeing their ego and just interacting with their ego, that means you are completely entrenched in your own ego, because only egos can have those interactions. But as you begin to awaken to the presence of the Holy Spirit in all the people that you are interactive with, that awareness begins to expand within you. You become aware of the presence and the activity of the Holy Spirit within your own consciousness. So that's why it's so very, very vital for us to realize that everybody we encounter is a reflection, and how we see them ultimately is how we see ourselves. And sometimes that can seem like a struggle to wrap your brain around. You know, how can it possibly be that that vicious bastard down at the end of the street is a reflection of me? I have never had a bad moment in my life where I wanted to go out and set somebody's dog on fire. Well, you may not have recognized those urges. You may not have been willing to see the presence of the ego's darker desires within your own ego. But the truth is, they are there. They are resident within the ego. And as you begin to awaken and cultivate truth, cultivate lucidity, cultivate the idea of, I'm willing to look into the darker corners of my own consciousness, you'll begin to recognize that the ego is the great betrayer, and that it is fully capable of the most hideous and atrocious acts imaginable. So do you really want to continue to support that ego, knowing that underneath it, buried in the depths of its recesses, is every dark and hideous concept that humankind has ever projected? So it really is, a matter of being honest with yourself. You truly do have to be willing to stop and listen to what's going on inside your own mind. We have all of this activity of the mind going on 24 hours a day, because even when you're sleeping, the mind is doing its little tumbling and, belching and farting and whatever. But nonetheless, it's always in motion. And the desired situation is to be able to tame the mind and to give it a little bit of form, give it a little bit of direction, and calm it down to the point where we can actually disengage from it. And once we're able to do that, once we're able to give the mind structure, all of a sudden a new world opens up for us. We enter into an entirely different realm that is 100% in the present. The ego is always engaging the mind in the past or in the future. It really doesn't have any concept of what the present is. And we have to be very alert to that. We have to be willing to give ourselves that push, that shove forward, because the ego is going to scream like a banshee once it starts to get tamed, and it will rebel. You can be assured of that. So, continuing with this, it says, the Holy Spirit is the idea of healing. Being thought, the idea gains as it is shared. So in order for you to gain a healing, you're going to amp up the experience in proportion to your willingness to share the experience with those around you. You cannot claim a healing for yourself alone. It simply doesn't work that way. In order for you to be healed, you have to be actively supportive of the idea of healing everyone around you. We are all headed toward the exit, but we're not going to be able to get out of here until everybody goes through that door, that final gate. So no matter how many times you think you've had a healing and you've walked away with some change in your physical experience, you really have to question whether or not it was a true healing, or whether or not you're going to have to address these ideas again in some later point, because it is all contingent upon your willingness to heal those around you. That really is at the core of every spiritual discipline. If you pay any attention, if you're a member of the Abrahamic traditions, if you're into Judaism, Christianity, Islam, if you're into Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, it doesn't matter, all the isms, at some point you will find at the underlying concepts, the underlying principles of that religion, the idea of oneness, of unity. And that is what it takes to heal. And to be healed is to realize that everything you undertake is not for you alone, but your healing will heal the world. So then it becomes a joyous experience. Then it becomes a really exciting dynamic, because you realize that you are making a contribution to not just the guy down at the end of the street, but to the entire universe, to all of humanity, to all of life in all corners of the universe. So the goals that we have are very, very lofty, and we have to be willing to reaffirm daily our desire to see everybody in a state of redemption. And then we will enter into that state of redemption. We will be healed. So as it goes on to say, being thought, the idea gains as it is shared. Being the call for God, it is also the idea of God. Since you are part of God, it is also the idea of your soul, as well as all his creations. The idea of the Holy Spirit shares the property of other ideas because it follows the laws of the universe of which it is a part. It is strengthened by being given away. It increases in you as you give it to your brother. Your brother does not have to be aware of the Holy Spirit in himself or in you for this miracle to occur. He may have disassociated the call for God, just as you have. This disassociation is healed in both of you as you become aware of the call for God in him and thus acknowledge its being. So every time that we practice that fundamental level of forgiveness, and discard our ego's interpretation of who somebody is and accept the Holy Spirit's interpretation, we are in fact making God manifest in this realm. We are making God manifest in the mind of the person that we are focusing on. We are making the presence of God manifest in our own consciousness in proportion to our willingness to let go of judgment, condemnation, anger, desire for retribution, all of those things that are essential to keep the ego happy. And the ego is definitely always thrilled to find out that, there is a sin that needs to be punished in somebody else. The ego is always projecting its own darkness into those around us. So what we're doing is we're reclaiming the truth and seeing God everywhere. One of the great teachers of God from previous century was Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science. And one of her little rhythmic kind of lines was, "There is no spot where God is not." And the only way that we can come to understand that is to constantly be in a state of manifesting the presence of God wherever we are. And as we replace hate with love, as we replace rejection and fear with acceptance and tolerance, and as we ascribe to see people as they were created by God and not recreated by us, then all of a sudden we take on a whole different perception of the world we're surrounded by. We begin to get that essence, that hint of God in every activity and in every individual that we encounter. So this whole process is so deep, it's so profound, and so powerful, and yet so simple. It is just brain dead, stupid simple. All you have to do is give up your judgments, give up your fear, give up your anger, and you step into a world where you are seeing the presence of God in every aspect of your living experience. Now, how dynamic is that? And how much is that worth a little bit of effort? So it looks like we're about finished up here with a half hour or so, moving into that final conclusion from today's thoughts. And what we'll do is finish it off here with this third section. There are two diametrically opposed ways of seeing your brother. They must both be in your mind, because you are the perceiver. They must also be in his, because you are perceiving him. See him through the Holy Spirit in his mind, and you will recognize him in yours. So in order for you to see the Holy Spirit within yourself and its presence within your mind, you have to recognize it in the minds and in the being of those that you encounter. It says, what you acknowledge in your brother, you are acknowledging in yourself. And what you share, you strengthen. And that's the ground level of the whole thing. What you share, you strengthen. Are you strengthening the presence of God in everybody that you are surrounded by? And you have to ask yourself this multiple times throughout the day, because it's very, very easy to fall into that habitual attack mode where we're just, frothing at the mouth and seeing the darkness in everyone around us. And so ultimately, the more you put these principles into process, the more you will see yourself in a much better light. the less you will be inclined to be depressed, the less you will be inclined to be angry or frustrated or blocked. So it really is an amazing journey. And you can determine how fast you can ascend as we're all on this magic rocket ride. So anyway, in 1 week, I will pick up the book and we'll take another look at it, see where we're at in the space-time continuum. In the meantime, my website is www.themiraclewithin.org. Check it out, lots of information there. If you have any thoughts or questions, definitely reach out to me. I'm accessible on Facebook and via Gmail and pretty much with social media and all of its different aspects. And get out there and make this next week a week of seeing God's presence everywhere. You can do it. You can make this happen. You can embrace these thoughts, and you can manifest a whole new way of experiencing life. So get out there, share the love, pass the love around, and we'll be speaking in 1 week.